academic paper, often it's divided into some kind of sections, right? This is the structure that we can see, just looking at the paper on the surface. It's the obvious structure. Some kind of headings, maybe numbers. Yeah, for example, you might have the heading introduction, or you might have the heading methods, results, conclusion. You might have numbers, like 1.1, 1.2. That's the obvious structure. What might not be so obvious just looking at an academic paper on the surface is the rhetorical structure that goes deeper than just the headings. Okay, so there's also kind of beneath this layer of titles and headings, there's also a rhetorical structure. And the rhetorical structure is made up of what applied linguists or people studying rhetoric would call moves. And so, you know, actually it's kind of related like to, I don't know, any kind of move we would call like dance move, or more like I think a move in a game, actually, I think is a good analogy. So if you think of like a chess game, right? When I say move now, I don't mean like the verb, I mean like hot in a game, right? So just like in chess game, maybe you would move the queen to accomplish some purpose, right? To capture some piece, or like, I don't know, look, I'm not very good at chess. Jesse is very good at chess. He tried to teach me, it was not very successful. You would do a rhetorical move to accomplish some rhetorical purpose, right? So maybe you want to convince your audience of something. So maybe you would use some strong language like certainly or obviously, or I don't know, some kind of adverb like that to make it sound very strong. Maybe you want to introduce a new topic. So you would say, on the other hand, or something like that. So we can use language. It's not always that obvious though, right? Sometimes we don't kind of introduce the move by using some word like certainly, or first of all, or moreover. Sometimes it's a little more subtle, and you have to look at what the author is accomplishing. What is the purpose of this sentence? Or what is the purpose of this clause? What function is the author trying to achieve? So kind of one of the early definitions of a move, not the first, but one that I thought was very nice. A move is defined as a segment of text that is shaped and constrained by a specific communicative function. Right, so it has to do with the function. What am I trying to do with language in this piece of writing? A move can then be divided into steps, right? So yeah, I guess like dance move, right? You would have some like dance move, but it would be divided into small steps. And those steps all have their own linguistic features. Some of them may be more standard than others. So for example, one move that might be necessary in an academic article is to say why your research is important or why it's new and unique. You might do that. One of the steps you might use is by creating contrast with previous research. Maybe saying the previous research wasn't good enough, or it wasn't thorough enough, or it's missing a piece. So you might use some kind of contrast word to show that, right? Previous scholars have placed Mark Twain's work in the body of 19th century American realistic fiction. However, in my opinion, he was actually the first science fiction writer. Right? It's nonsense, but you can see how, by using the word however, I am showing how my research is new and different from what came before. So we can identify specific linguistic features that are used to show those things, and then kind of like copy them into our own writing. Other parts besides the linguistic features that are important for second language writers, and even first language writers too, right? So like even native English speakers still have to learn this. It's not like no one is born like being aware of these things. It's not something you learn at home from your parents, unfortunately. Is the order moves, the emphasis of the moves. Sometimes certain moves are left out or certain steps are left out. So this could vary by discipline and by culture. As I'll show you a little later, I think that I've been focusing on literary study articles, but I think this probably applies a little more widely as well. From my research, I've seen that even though American journals contain articles that have similar moves to Ukrainian articles, not exactly the same, the emphasis seems to be on different parts. And I think that has to do with cultural differences. So really in the big picture, we're looking at kind of not just, oh, it's a different language, oh, I'm not sure what word to use, but pretty fundamental cultural differences and differences in publishing and academia and kind of on a very large and interesting scale. Okay. So again, things that we might look at, the more obvious titles, sectioning, how the paragraphs are set up, and the use of logical connectors, right? Like first of all, however, and all of that, that's all kind of like pretty easy to find, I think. And then on a deeper level, the function, the moves, the culture, the values, and all of that. Okay, so why would we want to analyze rhetorical patterns? Again, if you are looking at a specific field, you might just be looking at, say, social science, right? That's very broad. But if you look at applied linguistics or even articles on a similar topic to what you're studying, you can really identify how other authors who have succeeded in, say, publishing in a journal that you would also like to publish in, how they organize their papers, how they achieve the functions that they need to achieve in their articles. You can discover the typical patterns and cycles. So sometimes moves will cycle. We'll see that too. Like maybe I will introduce a contrast and then review past research and then introduce another contrast, right? So it's not always like a strict pattern. We can find out about linguistic features. That's very handy. So if you kind of discover that articles in your field typically follow a certain pattern and typically maybe use, X vocabulary to achieve certain functions, you can then recycle that into your own writing. And it doesn't mean that you then have to feel like you're imprisoned, right? Like you have to only use these words, but you have a broadened awareness. And so you maybe don't feel stuck or lost. You now feel like you are familiar with what tools you can use to achieve your purpose. We can improve our knowledge of rhetorical and linguistic formulas or patterns that you can use in your own work. So as I'll show you in a little bit, I have a worksheet where I've taken sentences from a professional published article, actually in a journal that I want to publish in, so maybe it's useful for me. And you can take some of the sentences and find what we call the functional language. So maybe the verbs, the articles, words like that, not the content words about what the article's about, but kind of make like a sentence with blanks in it. So like many authors have said blank, however in this paper blank, right? So now I can put my content into that model. And then maybe after a while I'll become very fluent in using these kind of patterns and I can branch out and create my own. I'm not sure if we'll get to this today, we'll see how much time we have, but I also have like a kind of paradigm for analyzing the logical structure of an article, which is closely related to the rhetorical structure, but not exactly the same thing. So if we have time, I'll come back to that. So the original kind of author who really dug into analyzing the rhetorical moves in research article was Swales in the kind of foundational paper in the early 90s, established this model that he calls CARS, creating a research space. Sounds very, I don't know, like touchy-feely or something. And so what that means is he had this idea that in an introduction of a research article, you have to make a place in the discipline for your research. So you have to express why it's important. You have to say what it's about. You have to say why it's new. You have to say why it's unique. Basically, claim that you belong in this discipline and that your research is interesting enough that people should read it. Sounds kind of difficult, actually. But if we break it down into steps, we see that it's actually not super complicated. So he broke it down into establishing a territory. So basically this means introducing the topic. Claiming centrality, right? So claiming that your topic is important to your discipline. Making some generalizations. Usually we'll see at the beginning of an introduction, the author makes some very broad statements. Right?
So that's actualist.
Yeah.
Claiming
I would say this is actualist, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And this is maybe, I don't know what that is. It's kind of making general statements to lead into your more specific idea.
It's the analysis of previous researches.
This maybe would be analysis of previous research, reviewing items of previous research.
Like,
This, making topic generalizations, is kind of like very often that first sentence. I can probably find a good example, actually. If I just look at any of these, articles that we have in one of these folders. I'll look at literature because I know these most of it. Just click on anyone, and probably at the very beginning, I bet we'll see a general statement. So here we go. This one starts with, this is a very obscure topic.
what is obscure? Can you tell us?
It's like,
Vague.
that's one meaning of obscure, yes. Kind of like not in an area of common knowledge. It's so specialized that it's kind of, how do I get rid of this? Well, maybe I picked the wrong one, but this isn't kind of a weird article, but enthusiasts marked by their rhetoric of self-authorization, their refusal to accept judgments and prevailing standards, and above all, their common zeal in religion. So he's making who knows what this is about, but he's making, it's some obscure literary topic, but he's making a general statement about enthusiasts, so some class of people. I don't know, sorry, maybe this is a terrible example because it's so, who has any idea what that's about? Let's see if we can find information. Here we go, this is perfect. This is much better, I think. So, this one says, bicultural literature by migrants is becoming increasingly popular in the Netherlands today. It's this is a much better example. It's a very broad statement, right? About literature in the Netherlands.
It's introduction to introduction.
Yeah, you could say that. It's setting up the introduction because we can't just be like, start with our thesis. You might scare the reader, kind of.
So that is called topic generalization, yeah?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but in general we say all these, claiming centrality and generalization, we all call actualist.
Oh.
We combine two things with,
Okay. Well, yeah, so maybe actualist would be like the move.
yeah,
But these are the
the
steps.
steps, yeah.
Yeah. So these might be the steps. A lot of times, like, at least, especially noticed in literary articles, they'll start this way, right? But they probably come in later also, right? It's not always just the first sentence. But often the first sentence is one of those. Although, interestingly, I see more and more now people starting an article with some kind of like personal story. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's only in literature articles I've noticed this. But anyways, back to this. Okay. So after we've established the general topic and its importance, and kind of told a little bit about the previous research, and again, this is in a certain order up here because it's what he found to be the most common. But it's not always just in this order, right? They could mix the pieces up. Establishing a niche. So this is establishing a narrower topic, kind of a place for yourself within this general topic. So this, I think, is one of the most interesting moves. You might counterclaim, right? Rowanson, 1990, claimed that monkeys were smarter than humans. However, my research has shown that humans are actually smarter. Right? So I'm counterclaiming. I'm saying, like, this research is wrong, mine shows something different.
Can you say I, my?
Yes.
We are taught not to say personal pronoun.
Yes, I know you are. You can, and you shouldn't say it in every sentence. Right? I think everything's about balance. So on the one hand, you don't want to say I like every sentence.
But
But on the other hand, in English, if you use the passive in every sentence, or even every other sentence, your writing will become very difficult to read. I was talking with this, wasn't I talking with you? I was talking with someone, oh, you were looking at the passive yesterday, and we were talking about it, and I was saying, you know, in Russian you have, Ukrainian too, I guess. I just know Russian, I'll talk about Russian. In Russian you have very nice passive. You can just put the reflexive ending on, and you have a beautiful passive sentence that's easy to read with no extra words. It's lovely.
No, I would not
But in English it gets crazy. So to avoid using the passive all the time, sometimes we really do need to refer to ourselves.
we can't even think that I can do something by myself.
Mm.
So
Not allowed.
No, please, do something by yourself. When you write in English, you can do everything by yourself. Maybe not everything, but you may please do things by yourself. And please, 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 if you authored a paper by yourself, don't use we. Yes, I know, like in Russian, Ukrainian, this is perfectly normal and acceptable. In English, people will flip to the front of the paper and be like, does this person have some like mental problem? Like, what? I believe that this, a long time ago, was used in English, but it's really fallen. It now seems very old-fashioned and very strange.
And again, it's cultural, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, no, I really believe that it is cultural, for sure. I mean, I could go into huge discussion on this. I think academia here is much more hierarchical. Not that it's not in the U.S., but meaning like you really have to move up through the ranks, right? Like maybe this person on the bottom does not have the right to say I in their paper. You have to, maybe 20 years later you can earn this way. I don't know. This is like, that's like a whole different discussion. I would love to talk to you about it. You might indicate a gap, right? Previous authors have, I'm just going to come up with really dumb examples, but you'll see the language. Previous authors have thought that monkeys were smarter than humans. However, they never studied the monkey's ability to play chess. So like, I will study this, so it's a gap in the research. Question raising. Just going to keep going with the monkeys. Previous authors have argued that monkeys are smarter than humans. However, is it true that something, right? So you see, you'll raise a question about the previous research. Maybe you'll continue a tradition. I personally believe that this is much more common in Ukrainian articles and these are much more common in American articles. I have to do a little more research and like maybe read more articles to be more conclusive about this, but this is my preliminary idea, that this is much more common. I've noticed in Ukrainian articles that it's typical to spend, so the articles I've been looking at tend to be much shorter than articles in American journals. Probably some of my colleagues have told me because they have to pay for each page. So you're encouraged to write only 5 pages rather than like 20 pages. That there's a considerably larger percentage of the papers devoted to reviewing literature and putting yourself kind of in line with previous authors, showing that you know their work and that you are kind of continuing it.
Or even out. They made, and I just have read.
Yeah,
And
even
mention.
actually that's very common. But I would be surprised too. Yeah, the publishing, the world of publishing is very different. There are many more small publications here, much shorter articles. It's really in all aspects, it's very different, including rhetorical aspects. And then occupying the niche. So this is basically saying, I've established this topic, shown that it's important. Now I've said that there's an important area that still needs more research. And now I'm telling you why this paper is going to answer these questions. Right? So, but they haven't studied how monkeys play chess. And so now I'll say like, why me and my paper are the best kind of candidates to answer this intriguing question. So you'll announce the present research, show its purpose, right? Maybe using what we call meta-language. Meta-language is when we talk about the paper itself. So for example, in this paper, I I will show that when playing chess, monkeys and humans have equal abilities. Announcing the principal findings. So sometimes you'll briefly tell the findings in the beginning of your article. Usually not in the abstract, but maybe in the introduction. Our findings, our preliminary findings indicate that if trained properly, a monkey can beat a human at chess. And you might indicate the structure. So I like to call this mapping. It's just kind of my word for it. Like you kind of give the reader a little tour of the article before you really get started. So this might involve kind of like ordering things. First, I will talk about the design of the experiment. Next, I will describe how the monkeys were trained. Third, I will give a move-by-move analysis of each game that the monkeys played. Right? And in conclusion, I will show that monkeys and humans are equally good chess players. Okay.
Like, it's just like a presentation. It's like American. So before they present anything, they just
Yeah. We do. Yep. Americans do the same thing at the beginning of a presentation.
Yeah, the logical. So and then at the end.
I don't know. I wonder who started doing it, and then it just caught on, and now it's like you have to do it. If you don't do it, people will be confused. They won't know it. They'll be like, it's like part is missing, you know. It's like, it would be like pasta without the sprinkles on top. It just, you look at it and say, what is that? Okay. So,
Просто как презентацию устную не делают, вопросы в начале, а в конце будут вопросы.
Вот так. Естественно, делают.
yeah, it's like you announce the program. Ladies and gentlemen, first you will be missed. So, since that kind of original Swales work, there's been a lot more exploration into rhetorical structure of research articles. And intriguingly, not that much has been done in the field of humanities. Now, I believe none of you are studying literature or cultural studies. Is that correct? No? Okay, good. So then you don't really have to worry about it. But this is kind of my area of research. So, but the point of this, we don't have to go through it, but just to show that in different disciplines, a lot of times there's similar moves, right? But maybe they have a different order, or there's a different emphasis, right? Like, we really put a lot of emphasis on move 1, but move 3, like, just do very quickly in one sentence. So it varies by discipline, that's the point. So we don't really have to look too much at this stuff. Alright, this is the discussion section, but before we get to this, I would like to actually look at some articles. So we'll do discussion sections later, but in order not to kind of overwhelm ourselves, let's just focus on introductions for now. Introduction is very difficult to write, and I think the two most difficult parts of a research paper to write are the introduction and the discussion, also called the conclusion. Yes, I see that you agree. Because, you know, like a method section or a results section is really not too difficult. I mean, in the scheme of things, right? Because, okay, in the methods, I just have to say what I did. I did this, I did this, I did this. Okay, it's not too bad. In the results section, I just have to say, this was the result, this was the other result, this was the other result. It's not too bad. But the discussion, the introduction and then the discussion are rhetorically very complicated. Because we have to not only show like, what is our research, but why is it important, and maybe you have to analyze results, interpret. This is the part where you would get lost. So today we'll just talk about introductions and conclusions. And actually, I forgot to mention this, but I kind of talk about research articles in terms of that introduction, methods, results, conclusion pattern. However, outside of the hard sciences, right, so like applied mathematics, physics, engineering, things like that. So I would expect that for Alexander, this pattern is mostly in any paper you would read. Introduction, methods, results, discussion, or conclusion. Outside of that, in the social sciences, like applied linguistics, doesn't necessarily follow that pattern exactly. Like you won't necessarily see these subject headings. Because sometimes for applied linguistics, pedagogy, some kind of paper like that, it's not experimental. right? So you won't necessarily have that very like separate methods and results section. It's a little less strict of structure. So I might refer to that, but please don't think that like in every discipline this is the only way to do it. Now, Natalia, who was here yesterday, she is focusing on like neuroscience and psycholinguistics, and so those papers tend to be very experimental, right? Because you're like playing with people's brains. So her papers did show the introduction, methods, results, conclusion. But outside of those disciplines, sometimes, outside of kind of purely experimental disciplines, you might not see that same structure. Okay. Alright, so if you go into the resources folder, I'm afraid my internet isn't working, so resources. You'll see the worksheets folder, worksheets, and then you'll see rhetorical analysis templates. So open that and download it. And what it is it's basically a worksheet that can help you guide you through the process of finding which moves are in your article and kind of taking them apart and turning them from what somebody else wrote to maybe an example that you could follow. So
should we download it?
yes, yeah, download it. Yeah. So find this and download it. And you'll see that in the first, well, I guess the third column, I've filled in examples from an article that I analyzed. So we can take a look at these and it will help us understand how to identify these different moves, right? Because that's the first tricky spot, is if we know what the moves are, but how do we identify them in an example article? Okay, looks like, yes, that's it. I'll just say okay. Everything fine. You probably want to enable editing. And make sure you press enable editing, because then only then will you be able to write into the worksheet. Alright, so let's look at some of the examples I have, and we'll see if we can talk about, do we agree that I correctly categorize the example? Because this is all very, at a certain level it's a matter of kind of opinion, or it's fairly subjective at some level. And we'll look at, in bold, I've put elements that I thought, this is something, right, the bold part that I could just take out and add my own kind of words to and like kind of remake the sentence. Okay, so the first one I found in my article was claiming centrality. And I believe this was the first sentence of the article, if I remember correctly. The gender category in Russian has evoked the interest of many scholars. So, do you agree that that's claiming centrality? And why? What about that makes you think, she's claiming centrality? Актуальность.
Evoke the interest.
Many scholars.
Many scholars evoke the interest. Got in trouble. Just press this, and then OK. Nope. Yeah. I guess OK. And then you press this. And then everything should be OK. Okay. Yeah. Oh, whatever it asks you, just say OK. What else? There's one other thing that I kind of want to. Where can I zoom in on this more? It's very small. Oh, you can see it on your screen.